Hey, so this is the commentary on who can stand up the longest. This episode is one of my very favorites. It's a little bit dry, but I like that. So the actual competition here really isn't interesting at all. It's not fun to watch them stand up or be standing. You don't really get a sense that they're very annoyed about the standing or in a lot of pain from the standing. That's not communicated. They aren't really fighting the desire to stop standing. Like, if this was a normal endurance competition, they'd be fighting against themselves. Here they're fighting with the fabric of the show itself by arguing over definitions. It's a reality show, so I don't really know that it does or doesn't have a fourth wall. But if it does, then this episode definitely breaks it a little bit by acknowledging that competitions need to be adequately designed or else they're going to get derailed. In general, I think episodes are stronger when their premise is clear. And this is just one of the exceptions where a poorly conceived idea is actually entertaining because that becomes the point of the episode. That being said, I still want to critique how they've defined standing. So, the stuff that Spenny has written on his whiteboard includes upright on both of feet, occupy one place, walking is not standing, leaning is not standing, stand with a barrel around, bearing weight maximize available as a stud. I don't really understand what some of those mean. In fact, I don't know why I brought it up except that I spent time trying to transcribe it, so I figure I would say it. So I'll cut to the chase. I think that the way you do this competition, if you actually want to do it, is to just rename it first to sit down loses. And you acknowledge that lying down or squatting would also be defined as sitting. And I think you could still lean and hang and move without it trivializing the competition. I'm glad they didn't do it because that would have made the episode less interesting, but I think that is how you fix it. This next exchange, I think, summarizes the main themes of the episode.
It is total bull.
It is.
Look, I'm standing.
I am standing
weight.
right now. I don't care what he says. This is standing.
I know you don't care what he says.
No, I
he
don't.
works for Merriam-Webster
I don't
Dictionary,
care.
and you are Kenny. You see, you're leading it.
Yeah.
I think you've lost the competition.
Not at all. Anyone would say I'm standing.
You know what?
I'm standing.
You're just gonna be.
So there's two main things going on here, and throughout the whole episode, right? The first one is Kenny playing chicken with Spenny. He knows that Spenny doesn't have the courage of his convictions, or else Spenny would just claim victory once Kenny very blatantly leaned within the first 3 minutes of the episode. So Kenny doesn't actually have to formulate an argument. He just needs to bet that Spenny won't be able to either. The second thing that's going on is the argument over authority. Spenny, Kenny, Jack Dope, Goldfield, the hot dog guy, the gymnast, the guy from Merriam-Webster Dictionary are all in contention as subject matter experts in the episode. And one of my favorite things about the episode is just the range of personalities in that list. It's particularly hilarious.
I'm just gonna stay like this. As long as I don't bend my legs 45 degrees, put them in the sitting position, I am totally...
Okay, so this is going to be the first time we see Goldfield in the order of these commentaries, though I don't think it'll be the last. Goldfield was found by a Season 1 PA who thought he would be a good addition to the show, and of course he is. There's a moment in the kitchen later on where Kenny's saying that Goldfield agrees with him about standing, and Spenny says that Goldfield is insane. Spenny says that Goldfield once offered him a pill that would make his dick 6 inches longer, which is pretty crazy. Listen to what Kenny says here.
Actually, I can't sit down.
No problem. Yeah.
So again, it seems the quickest way to describe a loss in the competition is to mention sitting. Also, it's kind of funny that Goldfield had to put on his very official lab coat once he saw Kenny come in, because he didn't have it on initially.
Toe massage. That way,
It's kind of cute that their socks match.
his blood flows.
Smart. If I lean against the wall, I'm still standing, right?
Looks like standing.
Yeah.
Looks like standing. Standing. I
Yeah.
think so. I think you. Yeah.
See, Spenny,
Yes.
Goldfield says I'm standing.
Yes.
And
Anytime. Good luck.
we'll
Good
see you
luck.
very soon.
There's a funny editing joke here.
You'll be a winner.
I will be a wiener.
Get it?
Of course, I'm standing, so I have to eat standing up.
Best dogs on the planet.
If you were
I love this scene because it's absurd for a lot of reasons. For one, Spenny acts like it's crazy that he's going to a hot dog cart just because he's standing up. Second, he's asking the guy at the hot dog cart what he thinks about the rules of the competition after it's already started. And the third, the hot dog guy is hyping up his hot dogs as if viewers are going to scramble to his street corner in order to get the best hot dogs on the planet, which is also funny.
Okay, well, basically I'm
And to prove my point, what Kenny is doing in this segment is trying to get someone to make Spenny sit down.
I got like $300 and
I wonder what the reasoning was behind blurring everyone in this shot, including Kenny.
I just want you to make them sit down. Do you guys know anybody that might want to make,
You can even see his face unblur once he walks away. It's like not even a different shot.
I'm gonna get my head kicked in.
Okay, so there's a university in the United States, and it runs the Foy Information Desk. It's named after some guy, Foy. You can call them and ask them anything you want, and they'll answer. So I'm going to get them on the horn and try to settle this debate.
Point information.
I just have a question. I'm trying to figure out if I had a friend, let's say, and they were standing and they started leaning, would that still be standing if they were leaning?
I mean, yeah.
Even if it was against a wall or something?
I mean, that would be more propped.
They'd be propped, but would they still be
If it was
standing?
against the wall. I mean, if it was, like, on its own, and it was just leaning, like it was just crooked, the person,
Right.
then they're still standing. But if their, like, weight is against something else, then, well, if you're just, like, leaning on a table or something, you're still standing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's difficult. What about hanging? Do you think someone who's maybe hanging from a trapeze or some kind of apparatus, is that person still standing?
No.
What if their feet are still touching the ground?
Well, it depends if their weight is on the floor or if it's being supported by whatever they're hanging by.
Yeah, in this case, they'd be supported by whatever they're hanging by, but the feet are still technically touching the floor.
I'm going to say no.
Okay. So it seems like your definition maybe relies on, like, where the weight is going. If the weight is being distributed into a wall and they're leaning against it, that's not standing. If the weight is being pulled by tension above them, then that isn't standing. Does that seem like maybe where you're
Yeah.
moving toward? Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Cora. That's all I wanted to know.
Okay, have a good day.
Yep, you too.
I'm going to sleep standing up.
All right. Well, I think that counts as another expert in favor of Spenny.
Be standing, and these bungee cords will be placed under my arms so that I actually don't collapse. And that while
You
I'm
probably already know this, but there are a few foreign versions of KvS. They basically licensed the idea of two friends competing to other regions because it's low budget and broadly appealing, and there were quite a few variations.
basically secure.
Turkey had Cenk versus Erdem, a French-Canadian version called Frank versus Gerard. There was one in India, the UK, Germany, and a ton of them in the Netherlands. There's also one from Portugal called Aldo e Nilton, and it's hard to find like anything at all about it. So some of the foreign formats even take like the same exact competitions and even copy like gag for gag the originals. Aldo E. Nilton does that to this competition with a guy in a corset and the other one playing video games in a diaper and all that. I would love to find more from that show.
Because I'm building a case. This is all I can do. Crutches. Good.
This is part
These photos would be like pretty high on my list of KvS souvenirs that I would love to have. They have that creepy 2000s look that you get when you take a photo with the flash on. It's like pretty great.
This is a guy who is posing for his own demise. Oh yeah, right. Doesn't even realize.
Okay, so let's quickly talk about hypotheticals. How else could this have ended?
Believe me.
Kenny wouldn't have given in on the argument, and Spenny wasn't having that hard of a time standing, so he may have been able to last quite a while. Kenny wasn't doing anything super aggressive, so this seems just like it's destined for a stalemate, I think. If they both seemed to go the distance and neither one was going to give in to the other's definition and all that, then yeah, the draw makes sense. The premise of the competition, which is like standing, it's just not that interesting at all. What's good about this episode is that they do a sudden death instead of just calling it a draw or weaseling out of an actual ending. So I like that at least.
This one,
Great.
this way as well.
Okay.
I was even
A question I've been asking in these commentaries is, how unique is this? And I don't think watching people stand is unique at all. And I know there's an endurance to it, but you don't really feel their pain too much, so it doesn't really feel special or interesting how much they're standing. But like I said before, the episode is really about the argument that they're having. It's not the standing. And if you think about it like that, the argument really is unique. Like, the reason it exists at all is because they're doing this television show, and there aren't many others that would let you see behind the curtain like that. Okay, so we are about to be introduced to Jack Dope, who is probably my favorite one-time character in the series. I like Jack because he's one of the only people that Kenny and Spenny universally respect. And in a show that's just pure chaos and between the battle of good and evil, he is a lawful neutral, a truly learned man. Plus, he dresses sharp, he's got a great name. He's just of a totally different era than anyone else you see on Kenny vs. Spenny. The KvS subreddit named him the 8th best side character, which makes him the 3rd best one-time side character, beaten only by Fet Knight and the anonymous crackhead from Who is Cooler. Jack Dope is unfortunately no longer with us. John Harward Somerville Dope died a few years ago at the age of 87. Spenny knew Jack when they worked together in the real estate business. So occasionally in the show you can see like a little placard on Spenny's desk with his name on it. That came from that real estate job. And Spenny and Jack had tried to write a screenplay once about the tabloid industry. Something you may not know about Jack is that he has a glass eye. And he wears it well, because I have never, ever noticed.
I will even allow him
Okay,
to
well then
use
is he
this.
merely being intellectually difficult
Yes,
about
he is.
definition?
You know why? Because he's been up.
I spend my entire life being intellectually difficult about definitions, I think.
And his attitude are very grumpy. He's been walking.
I'm not an expert, but I think that this thing that Kenny is on is a rig for what is called aerial silks.
He just didn't have
I suppose the silk is the ribbony thing he's hanging from.
How do you describe a person like this? A person who...
I looked online and I quote, "An average engineer-tested and approved aerial rig costs about $2,000.
I mean, are you suggesting that he might be...
The gymnast acrobat lady probably just brought it over. At first I thought it was maybe the same rig that they used to give Spenny an atomic wedgie in Who is Stronger, but I think they're different.
their body relaxes.
He put himself in the sleeping bag with his shoulders and armpits basically slung into that. Now, in that state, could you honestly say that that individual is standing?
Well, Spencer, we have a problem here. You should have had an agreement about
We do not.
whether or not you could be supported by instruments other than yourself.
Jack is cutting directly to the core of the issue, and the argument eventually ends on his point. There's a draw due to definition, and what Kenny does here is the coup de grace.
Sit down.
No.
If I'm not standing, sit down, Spenny. Sit down. See? And that's why we are still going.
I think what has happened is perhaps he has admitted that you've outsmarted him intellectually.
Yes. I have outsmarted him intellectually. Thank you so much, Jack. Great expert you brought in today, Spenny.
Kenny, nice to see you again.
Jack, it's always a pleasure. Take care. So, as you heard it yourself, Jack Dope said that I have outsmarted Spenny intellectually.
This is like some kazoo cover of the song We're in the Money.
Like a newborn baby. I'm just gonna hang out for a bit.
a foot massager okay?
The logistics of the diaper confuses me. I feel like it wouldn't be impossible to poo standing up, and I also think that trying to take a diaper full of poo off of yourself and disposing of it must be really, really difficult.
What am I doing? Why bother? I'm going to get my own harness.
I love this shot of Spenny.
This is ridiculous. I'm hanging in the garage.
The way the camera pans over to him and the musical sting hits, it makes it seem like they're revealing Frankenstein's monster or something, but it's just Spenny.
Today. But it is a relief. Oh my God.
I guess Spenny doesn't fit in his closet, so he has to hang in the garage, and I think there's something very sad about that. Like, what does it say about a man that he can't even hang himself in his own closet? I mean, hang from his own closet.
It just doesn't seem like there's any purpose in it.
We have called a draw due to definition.
Okay, so let's talk about this draw for a second. Obviously, they've sat down at this point, which makes sense if they've agreed to a draw. But it shows how arbitrary draws are, right? Like, in Handcuffed, they call a draw, but Kenny winks, so he's able to claim retrospectively that it was in bad faith, and that he actually won. But in this episode, he's not playing that card. He's letting the draw play out, and I've talked about this endlessly in other places, so I don't want to keep mentioning it, but it does show that the actual logistics of the competition really don't matter. It's about what you do with it. And that's pretty much true about life in general. Like, God is dead, and you're allowed to do whatever you want as long as you can get away with it, and anything you say may as well be true as long as nobody's there to say otherwise. Anyway. Kenny's doing a clever thing here. He's showing that he doesn't have any gimmicks in order to imply that shoes may be an advantage, so that Spenny will take his shoes off so that the itching powder is going to affect him. I guess that's one way this could have ended differently. Like, if Spenny didn't take his shoes off or the itching powder didn't do anything or whatever, then it would just end in some pure manner, assuming Kenny didn't have any kind of backup plan, which would also be fine.
Good luck.
Okay, so I did kind of a nutty thing. And I recorded this, but I don't think I'm going to do anything with it because it's kind of unusable. But I bought some classic Joke Shop itching powder. It even has the same ugly, like, clip art guy that was on Kenny's package. I don't have any carpet available to me, so I had to, like, fold up a towel, but I taped a square, I put itching powder on it, and I stood there, like, for a while to see what would happen. I'm not kidding, I really did this. The package said use sparingly, and that a little goes a long way, but I put the whole thing onto my little square. Mine was like a pure powder, whereas Kenny's was almost like chunky. I don't know if that means anything. But anyway, I felt nothing. I was fine. I stood there for over an hour and just walked off because it wasn't doing anything for me. There was some tickling in my legs at a point, but I think that was just unrelated. The worst part of it was that my back was starting to hurt. I have a bad back from sitting in goblin mode for 500 years. The package said 2005 on it, so maybe it like went bad or something. I felt two things in my feet. The duct tape I used to make the square was sticking to my foot, and sometimes I felt like a jabbing sensation. I looked up what was in itching powder as I was already standing in it, and there wasn't really a conclusive answer. In some cases it seems organic, like it's parts of a pepper or something. I think I saw some seeds, and that was what was jabbing at me, but it didn't itch. It was more effective as like a jabbing powder. Anyway, I recorded pieces of that in hopes of it being interesting, but I honestly just gave up on the production of it because nothing was happening. Plus, given YouTube's restriction on sexual content, I'd probably need to like blur my feet before uploading it anyway. So what does that mean in the context of the episode? Well, I'm not calling bullshit on the itching powder or anything. Maybe I didn't do it right. I did think it was relevant that Spenny went from shoes and socks to bare feet, so I did that. Maybe my powder was bad. Maybe the towel acts different than a carpet. Maybe it was because I knew there was powder there. Maybe it was because I hadn't also been standing up continuously for most of the previous days. Maybe I'm just not as neurotic as Spenny, so the psychological factor didn't really affect me. I don't know. I was looking forward to the moment when I'd get to rub my feet after having an agonizing itch, and now I'm just disappointed. Anyway.
And I'm just biting off a piece of your nail, and that is it. I am not. And if you put your foot in my mouth in any capacity, or you know what you do, I am going to punch you, and I will punch you hard. It's going to be all teeth and nail, okay? Oh, Jesus Christ. Do not miss this. I'm going fast, in and out, as fast as I can. Okay, I picked my toe. They're discolored, Kenny. Go for this little pinky.
So Kenny has used this humiliation as an example of why writing humiliations is hard, because you're like, Spenny is such a loser, I'm gonna make him bite my toenails. But now you've got Spenny's mouth on your foot. So it's not a great experience for you either.
I can't do it.
That made me think, like, what's the worst second-hand humiliation? Like, I think the worst humiliation for Kenny that he wasn't actually doing is probably having to get the kernels for the poop corn, if I were to make my guess. There weren't that many humiliations that Spenny wasn't already doing himself. So I guess it would be him having that tomato thrown at him at the end of Who Can Commit More Crime, but that's kind of pathetic.
No, I want to see it. Pull it up. I don't see it.
There it is. There it is.
Okay, Spenny's done it.
There's a weird editing mistake here where you can hear Kenny say more mouthwash in the same way twice.
More mouthwash. More mouthwash. That was pretty good. Double humiliation. Toenail in mouth and
Alright, well that's it.
mouthwash.
As always, I appreciate anyone who listens to these. Thank you.